Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and I'm your moderator. And I'm in a new background today. I'm doing my first live remote from Los Angeles. So I want to jump right into it today because we're also doing something new, which is we're recording this session in advance. And so normally you'd be able to throw comments into the live stream and we'd ask and answer questions. We can do this after the fact, and I'll explain how you can do that after we get to that point. But what I want to do is I want to introduce my guest today, Terry Collingsworth. Hey, Terry of International Rights Advocates. Welcome back to, welcome back.
Thanks a lot, Clay. Good to see you, and I'm very happy to be here discussing our progress.
Yeah, so you've been a guest either on the Chocolate Life on Clubhouse or the Chocolate Life Live, I think 3 times in the past. I mean, I'm happy to be able to moderate a panel discussion that you gave in New York City, either earlier this year or late last year, where you were talking about The Chocolate War, which is the movie with Mickey Mastrati. And so it's good to catch on these updates. And the reason why we're here, everybody, is that not as a result of, but in concert with a bit of CBS News reporting that was done, International Rights Advocates has filed a new lawsuit against Mars and Mondelēz and Cargill. Right. And we're going to be talking about those today. But first, Terry, if you can, what can you tell me about what it is that you were doing with the CBS News investigation, how that came to be, and what it is that you saw while you were there?
Yes, the CBS News crew that came with me, we have known each other for some years. They reported on my cobalt case involving child labor and cobalt mining in the Congo. And we've been trying for quite some time to get both a date and a reason to go to Ghana together. And then lightning struck. We've been getting calls from whistleblowers, people who want to tell the truth about what's really going on in the cocoa industry. And a lot of those calls are coming because people have seen the Chocolate War film, and then they contact either me or Mickey Mastrati and say, we'd like to help. So I got contacted by someone in Ghana who is fairly high position in a major chocolate company. And he essentially said, if you can come to Ghana, it'll be worth your trip. I want to tell you what I know. So I contacted the CBS crew and said, let's go. This sounds like the chance we've been waiting for. So we did. And our whistleblower, he blew all of our minds in terms of his access and what he showed us. Excuse me. Essentially, first he took us to the plantations that he knew about that didn't just have, excuse me, a child or two working. They were all children. And the youngest one we interviewed was 5 years old. She was old enough to use a scythe to be weeding around the trees. But CBS aired all of this amazing footage of plantation after plantation after plantation that was essentially child labor everywhere. So that was one thing he showed us. He knew where to take us because of his position. And then second, he revealed to us, and it was exposed on the CBS News piece, that the rehabilitation programs for those companies are a complete fraud. The companies all have lists of children that have been, they claim, have been rehabilitated. What that means is if you actually got what the companies are handing out, they give the kids a backpack and a school book, and the kids are back at work. So we interviewed a couple of kids that were in that category. And then there were also kids whose names were on the list who never even got the damn backpack. And then we also found there were names on the list that didn't exist. So our whistleblower told us that the companies put pressure on the folks doing the so-called rehabilitation. So they make up names so that they can sort of meet a quota. But the most shocking thing to me, at least, was even if you got your rehabilitation, the companies all claim on their websites that anytime they find a child, they're giving them remediation, rehabilitation. The most you get is a friggin' backpack and a school notebook. So it's all a fraud.
So I have two questions immediately. Number one is, I think that as a part of this reporting that these companies do, what they say is, here's a farm, and what we have done is we have certified or verified that there is no illegal child labor going on in these farms. And that's where you went. The first farm you go to, there are children everywhere, correct?
And it was this time, this is so exciting to me. This time, the whistleblower took us to farms that were clearly identified with one of the companies. So we went to Mars Farms and we went to Cargill Farms. And I was able to ask the farmer, the person who essentially was running the plantation, who they sold to. They said Mars, Cargill. And in one case, they took us to the Cargill collection center that was about 50 meters from this particular farm. So there's no doubt that the companies this time are not going to be able to say, well, how do we know that it's really our farm? Well, we know this time.
And that has actually been part of the defense in the past, is that this is an arm's length relationship. We're buying through intermediaries. We actually don't know what it is that's going on. And what you've done in this reporting is you've actually been able to pull back this curtain and reveal the fact that, yes, they are in fact knowingly complicit in what it is that's going on.
Exactly. And we couldn't have done it without a whistleblower. And that's a shame, because the companies are hiding this. That's all part of their game. But finally, I think we have nailed them.
So let's go back. When you talk about remediation and rehabilitation, we often hear of something called CLMRSs, which is child labor monitoring and remediation systems. And there are ones which are sort of industry wide. So it's a coalition of these big companies. They have one that they all work together. So do you know if the monitoring and rehabilitation systems that are ones which are also associated with Fair Trade International, right? Or are these
Absolutely
independent, which are run by the companies?
No, these are all within their system that are fair trade, and they are in the CLRMS, so that this wasn't like an odd or aberration. This is their normal practice that we witnessed, and it's as bad as I thought it was, but it even blew my mind that it is still this bad. And I want to remind your audience that this is more than 22 years after the companies all promised to stop using child labor when they signed the Harkin-Engel Protocol in 2001. I've always said, and now I think we have proven, that what they're doing is only a public relations oriented exercise. They're telling you the great things they're doing. They believe the public will trust a name brand corporation when they say something. And sadly, that's been true so far. So we're working really hard to get the public to understand that these corporations are lying and that they're committed. And we hope, as we've been saying on my team, that might be our tobacco moment, where the tobacco companies did the same thing, lied, and until someone within one of them came forward and said, no, this is all a lie. And it really was hard for people to accept that corporate America does not tell the truth very often.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yes, that the market rewards the appearance of doing good, not actually doing good, as I have sometimes said. So let's just go back there. So this whistleblower reached out to you. You went with CBS. You've got all this footage, much of which was aired, but not all of which was aired in the CBS documentary. What I want to do is I want to remind people that for every single one of these episodes, I put together a post on the Chocolate Life. Here is the post for today's episode. You can go there. You don't have to write down any URLs or going places. There are links here in the post that you can go to. If you want to ask questions, you can go down here into the member discussion, and we'll follow that. And we'll make sure that all your questions get asked and answered after the fact. But what I want to talk, Terry, now is that, so you filed the new lawsuit in the last week or so. So what, and I remember we had a conversation at the first one, I think it was like, in the first 4 or 5 months of lockdowns, right? But we're talking about the first case in DC actually in front of the Supreme Court, which argues a theory called the Alien Tort Statute, right? Now, I understand you also have an ongoing lawsuit. I'm sorry?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Then there's also an ongoing lawsuit, which is associated with something called the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, right? Right. And these are two very different theories of law, which are being used to go after these big companies, right? So can you do a quick refresher about what the difference is between the Alien Tort Statute and the TVPRA?
The Alien Tort Statute was passed by the first Congress in 1789, and it is a beautifully elegant statute that simply says in about 16 words that an alien can sue in tort for a violation of the law of nations. And so our clients are aliens, and the tort is forced child labor, and that happens to be a law of nations violation. Unfortunately, through a series of decisions and then culminating in my case, Doe versus Nestle, the very conservative Supreme Court added on to the statute a very complicated extraterritorial jurisdiction requirement. And I just want to pause and say, these are the justices whose claim that they're following the original intent. They're following the language of a statute, et cetera, et cetera. But when it suits their personal views and often helps corporate America, they'll vary from that judicial philosophy. So in this case, they added more words to the statute than were there in the original drafting in 1789. So they've made this test now that you have to show that a majority of the acts took place on the territory of the United States, which is not part of the statute. They made it up. And so they found that since all the slavery was going on in Cote d'Ivoire, we couldn't sue under the statute. There was no jurisdiction to do so. So they didn't say there wasn't child slavery. They didn't say that all these companies were responsible. They just said, well, sorry, you can't sue because we made up this new standard and you don't meet it.
So we no longer have standing to sue. In other words, right? Okay.
Their ruling would essentially only allow us to sue if Nestle kidnapped kids from New Jersey or some other place and took them over there and put them to work. So we really don't use that statute anymore, and we're trying to get Congress to fix it. But as you know, our Congress is pretty useless at this moment, so that's not going to happen. The TVPRA, the trafficking statute, it is much more specific, and that means less amenable to tampering by the judiciary. So we have a case against the 8 major companies, Nestle, Cargill, Hershey, Berry Callebaut, Mars, Cargill, and Olam. And we have a new group of child slaves that were trafficked from Mali to Cote d'Ivoire. And that case is currently pending in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. We think we will win because the statute is really well drafted. It was designed to go after sex trafficking mainly, so conservatives supported it. And it only requires that we show the companies knew or should have known that they were benefiting from forced child labor. And we think we've done that very easily. So we expect to win that. The new case that we filed.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in here? So in the TVPRA suit, it's pending. So is this pendency hearing, the hearings in front of either the judge or the panel, and so that you would be able to introduce the evidence that you found in the CBS investigation, or are you beyond the point where you can introduce new evidence?
Yes, on appeal, the record is the record that existed when it went on appeal. But they will probably have heard about this. I think the CBS News piece got a lot of coverage. A lot of people saw it. But the good news is that the standard is so friendly to the kind of case we have that I expect that we will win. Without getting too technical and taking up too much time, the Court of Appeals, this is the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, the second most important appellate court in the country. They have yet to decide this case because they're waiting to see what they also do, the same court, in my Cobalt case, which was argued well before the Cocoa case. So we're actually just passed the 1-year anniversary, December 8th, when I argued that case in the DC circuit, the Cobalt case. And so we're overdue for the decision. So it's like giving me heartburn. Every morning I check to see if the decision was sent to me, but we're waiting.
Sure.
As soon as that comes down, they will then decide the TVPRA Cocoa case.
Yeah, the theories of the case are very, very similar. Circumstances are slightly different, but absolutely. And by the way, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been spending a lot of my spare time listening to legal podcasts and legal adjacent videos, so that I understand the relationships of the various courts that are involved in some of the legislation, not some of the legislation, but some of the legal, what gets heard up on appeal and how it gets heard up on appeal, and who the judges are. I mean, I know more about the names of judges in the DC circuit than I think I know, like, for many other places, just because of my familiarity with those things. And I'm trying to understand them, because I think it's really important that we understand the nature of the legal system and how the legal system works in our favor and can be manipulated so that it works against us, right? And because that knowledge is really interesting. I find it interesting, and I hope the people who are watching this find it interesting. Right. But the new case that you filed, and what I want to do is really, really quickly just show this. So if you go to this post for Pod Save Chocolate, you can scroll down and you will find that there is a link here. It's got Terry's smiling face on it. And this is a link to the page on International Rights Advocates website where you talk about this particular lawsuit. So Terry, what is different about the theory, I mean, the legal theory that you are investigating in this new case that is different from the Alien Tort Statute and the TVPRA? And why do you think, and what was the thinking behind doing it this way, right, that might sidestep some of the hurdles that you found in some of the other cases?
Yes, there are a number of reasons, but initially my thought process was, because we had exposed the fraud of these companies in claiming that they don't have child labor, and then also claiming that whenever they find an occasional child, they rehabilitate them, and we expose the fraud of that. So I was thinking, this is sort of a different character of a case. Sure, there's child labor, and we're going to get that too, but the anchor claim here is consumer fraud, and DC, it's not a state, whatever it is, the entity of the District of Columbia has a good consumer fraud statute. So we decided that that would be the anchor claim. We wanted to really emphasize, not only is there child labor, but they're lying repeatedly and over decades about this. So that became the anchor claim. And then we thought that we wanted to avoid the hurdles and the time schedules of the federal courts and just try something different. So we decided that we would stick to just simple state law torts. So this case involves, first of all, consumer fraud, and then 3 torts: unjust enrichment, negligent supervision, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we lay out in the new complaint how easily we satisfy those elements. And I think unjust enrichment is really the tort that will allow us to get compensation not only for these victims but for others. The notion of unjust enrichment, which is an actionable tort in almost every state, and it's inherited from the Great Britain, where some lawyers there have been using it to great effect. The idea is, if you commit a wrongful act and deprive someone of the benefit of that they are entitled to, in this case, the children are providing free labor, and we're asking the court to say these companies should pay up for their years and years of getting free labor from children in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. So I'm hoping that we can get this kind of claim front and center and get major compensation for all of the children, and we've sought class certification to do that.
So, like, my mind is swirling around questions. So number one is, you're talking about unjust enrichment. So in the state of New York, where I am from, we have a civil fraud case, right? So it's a state civil fraud case, right? For which one of the remedies is disgorgement, right? Which is different from compensatory damages. So,
That's
and
right.
punitive damages. So in this case, are we looking for disgorgement of profits, which will then be distributed, or
Yes.
compensatory and punitive damages, or all three?
Well, we are seeking with unjust enrichment disgorgement of profits. So that would be a lot of fun to be calculating just how much they've robbed these people of their labor. We also, in the negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress, we are seeking damages and punitive damages. But the court won't allow us to double dip. So there's going to be some process where we decide that the disgorgement might be the extent of damages, and then we still could seek punitive damages on top of that. But as I like to say, that's a problem I look forward to having, to be arguing over exactly how much would be involved in making these companies properly pay for their pillaging of these countries for years.
So when it comes to the negligence aspect of this, when we mentioned the CLMRS, so is there some sort of consent decree component of this to make sure they're actually doing what it is that they say they're doing as well?
Well, yes, there would be. That's what we'd be asking for. But if we actually get a liability decision on negligent supervision, I guarantee you they'll start supervising a little bit better going forward.
Right. No, absolutely. And just because we're doing this, because this is a state action, is there any chance, once it gets to the DC Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, no chance to appeal it up to the US Supreme Court because it's an entirely a state matter? There's no federal aspect to it?
There are some situations where a state Supreme Court decision could be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court if there is a federal constitutional issue presented, but I can't imagine one that would be presented in this case. So we feel pretty safe. What we do expect is that the defendants will try to remove this to federal court, and that's a routine thing for them to do. And we're prepared to fight on that and expect to prevail. We want to keep this in state court where the plaintiffs decided to file it.
No, I can understand. If nothing else, just actually the process required to just hear the appeal to move it from state to federal court could take a long time.
Yes.
These things do take time.
Delay is always in the interest of the companies, and that's why they hire the most giant law firms, and they fight every single step of the way. But we hope we can compress the timeline by being in state court. I would like to mention one unique thing that happened here, if I may, that
of course
we in paragraphs, I think it's 7 and 8 of the complaint, we specifically pointed out that because these kids were going to be seen on CBS News, we pointed out that it is a felony to go to the plaintiffs in this video or to any of the clients and try to intimidate them, threaten them, or get them to retract their stories. So Mars, only Mars right now, Mars first issued a statement complaining that CBS News did not give it enough time to respond to the allegations being made. So then when they saw the video and they received the complaint, so they had plenty of time, instead of investigating and taking some remedial action on these allegations, they sent 2 goons to the home of one of the women in the case, and they went to her daughter's school and threatened them and tried to get them to retract the story. They tried to get them to sign a statement that said that this was all staged and is really not true. And that really shocked me. I expect the worst from these corporations that are willing to profit from child slavery, but to actually do that right after it was filed just blew my mind. And I pointed out in the complaint that they have my phone number and they will notify me immediately. So I sent a cease and desist letter to Mars, its CEO, and number of their high corporate executives, and they did not respond. And then the harassment continued, and I sent another letter, and then they responded with their lawyers. Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, that notorious firm that represented Nestle all those years in the Supreme Court, They are now representing Mars. So that's the kind of company we're dealing with.
So just an interesting question. Just, you just, but CBS didn't actually have any obligation to notify Mars in advance of what was going to be revealed in this investigative report, did they? So they're actually asking for something which is they're not entitled to in that respect.
Absolutely, but if they had given them more notice, they probably would have sent their goons out ahead of time. So no, CBS did everything absolutely by the book. They did give the CEO an opportunity to comment, and as is shown in the news piece, they went to his house, and they said he wasn't available or something. His might have been his wife, and then they complained that Deborah Powell was aggressive. They complained to her boss, and the video speaks for itself. All she did is ask if he was home.
Right. So what I do want to do here is again go back to the post on the Chocolate Life. If you go click on the link, which gets you to the case update page, right? What you can do is this green button in the middle. It says "Read the complaint," so you can click on it and you can get the complaint if you want to read it yourself and understand exactly what the language is. I haven't read it myself. I'm sorry about that for not reading it in advance and understanding it. But I may do that and provide some commentary afterward. But I want to let everybody know that if they are interested in reading the complaint, they can go and take a look at the complaint and understand what it is that Terry is saying. Now, there's before we wrap it up, I want to get things quickly taken care of. But Terry, one of the things that you shared with me yesterday as we were corresponding is there's a new lawsuit, right? And this lawsuit is not in the United States. And so, tell me what you can about this new and how it relates to this lawsuit in France and how it relates to what it is that you're doing.
Yes, and this is literally breaking news on your podcast that this morning, just a little bit ago, we filed a new complaint in France under their due diligence law.
Can I share the press release? Can I share the press release?
Yes, and complaint. Those are now public documents after we filed them.
So here is the press release, and what I will do is I will put this press release as well as another document so that you can read. So you'll be able to download them. I have the file, so people will be able to read these after the fact. But so sorry for interrupting, Terry. I just wanted to let everybody know what was going on here. So please, continuing about the complaint.
Sure. So France has what is called a due diligence law, and theirs is actually a good one. Everyone who has more than, I think it's 1,000 employees, that doesn't matter in our case because we bring in a complaint against a giant supermarket chain of Hawaii. Its details are in our complaint in the press release. So under French due diligence law, this supermarket has to disclose any problems that they know about in their supply chain involving human rights or environmental violations that are specified in the statute. So this supermarket and most of the other supermarkets in France, they're selling Nestle, Mars, Hershey, Berry Callebaut, and Mondelēz products, among others. And they do not disclose that these companies have serious allegations against them on child labor, forced child labor, and deforestation. So the complaint against the supermarket will require them to either have complete disclosure of all of these problems and remediation that is satisfactory to the French law, or they can no longer sell the products. So it's a really good law. People have been using it. It's not that old, but people have been successfully using it in France. And my lawyer in France, I have to mention, he was a consultant on the law itself. His name is William Bourdon, and I've known him for almost 30 years. We've collaborated on cases, and he is quite optimistic about the chances of our success with this statute.
Well, I'm just thinking about, the statute and the fact that there is a requirement to report about deforestation. Right. And then one of the things we'll be talking about this coming Tuesday is I have Anthony Fountain from the Voice Network, and we're going to be talking about the EU deforestation regulation, what we call the EUDR. And there is it is going to be a messy time, right? And so I can see what's going on with this particular lawsuit and the EUDR. There being some sort of overlap and in a conflict which may or may not be good, or we don't know what the conflict is going to look like yet.
The EU is near passing a due diligence law itself that is very, very cumbersome and ineffective. France has a good law, which is why we chose France. And we're hoping that either way, either the companies finally are forced to fix their problems, or they won't be able to sell their product in the major supermarkets of France. That's the first country we're working on. We want to set the precedent in France and then take it from there. But the message I want the companies to receive is that they can't get away with this by just tying me up in U.S. courts on appeal. That there are other places, good lawyers who are going to come after them as well, because there's no question that they are still profiting from child labor, forced child labor, and it's time for them to stop.
And I think, that's a good place to put a pin in it for today, Terry. But what I want to do is I want to close out with a couple of things. First of all, we're looking again at the case update page at IRAdvocates. If I am watching this episode of Pod Save Chocolate and I want to assist in IRAdvocates efforts, what can I do to help IRAdvocates push this forward?
Thanks for asking that. A couple of things. Number one, there is a place on our website where you can click on it. It will let you send emails to all of the major chocolate companies. So we would appreciate it if people get on there and send emails out to the companies, basically saying you're not going to buy their products anymore until you are convinced that they're no longer profiting from child labor and they're stopping their deforestation in their cocoa operations as well. That's one thing. The second thing is, as a small nonprofit corporation, we rely entirely on donations, and there's a donate button easily available on the website. We get donations of $5, $10, any little bit helps. We're taking on the largest multinationals out there, and we'd appreciate it if you joined the team and worked with us to help us do that.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I invited in today. One of the things that I can do, and one of the things we can, with a platform that I have, is to let people know about that. What I want to do is I want to finish this to say, this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, as every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is sponsored by the members of TheChocolateLife.com. You can go to The Chocolate Life. There's a little green button up here. I'm logged in, so it says account, but if you're not a member and you're not logged in, it will say join. Just click on join. There's always a free membership. If you end up watching this on YouTube, do a like, subscribe to the channel, Facebook, LinkedIn, follow what it is that we're doing, and that will support what it is that we're doing here. And I want to ask everyone who's watching this, is I've been talking about Pod Save Chocolate and this idea of, commitments. The work that I'm doing with international cocoa diplomacy, one of the things we say is that, diplomacy is not a once a year thing. It's like, what am I doing today? What am I doing this week? What it is that I'm doing next month to advocate for the causes that I am passionate about. And so one of the things I will ask, as Terry said, is if you're watching this, go to the IRAdvocates website and send a message to each one of the companies and share your thoughts with them. If you do have some spare change, supporting the work that they're doing is also valuable. What I'm going to commit to, and this is something, Terry, I do with all of these episodes of Pod Save Chocolate, is I try to say, what is it that I'm going to commit to? And I'm going to commit through Pod Save Chocolate and the work that I do to make sure that we stay in touch and that we let people know about the updates over the course of the next couple of years and continue to advocate for what I believe is the important truths underlying the reporting that Big Chocolate is doing. Not to let them, to hold their feet to fire, right? And not to let them get away with it. I think in that respect, we are very, very closely allied. Right. And with that, I want to thank everybody who's watched
Absolutely, I
today. Again,
appreciate
this was
that.
this was an experiment. This is the first time I've done a pre-recorded session. I haven't done a whole lot of live remotes. I'm sitting on the 29th floor of an apartment complex in the rooftop lounge of the building. I had a meeting here earlier this morning with a client. It was the best thing I could do. It's been quite a topsy-turvy morning for me. But I will be back this coming Tuesday with Anthony Fountain of the Voice Network. Terry, again, thank you very much. I wish you and yours the best for the holiday season. I hope that one day our travels, will be able to coincide so that where I have an opportunity to join you, in a producing country on the farms, to be able to do my own take and recording on this kind of stuff. All right. And with that,
Absolutely. Thank
everyone,
you.
I will, as I close out, remember, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And until the next time, everyone,